So when we're climbing, we use cracks like this to place protection in the rock. This is called a cam. This is a number 2, which protects about that size, which is about 1.5 inches up to about 2.5 inches. And here's a pretty good sized crack for it right here. You squeeze it and put it in. Make sure all the lobes are at a good angle. They're not too small or too large. You want it to be just right, about right there. Get it in the crack. You weight test it and pull on it, and then extend it right here. Clip this to your rope and keep on climbing. So cams come in various sizes. This is a 0.4, and you can see it's got a lot less range. It goes from about 1/2 inch up to about 3/4 inch. And here's an okay crack. It's not very good, so you look at it at the side, it's flaring out that way. But you can put the cam in, check, make sure all the lobes are engaged, walk it around a little bit, and so that's bad if that happens. If it becomes tipped out, you're only being held by that, and that's not super safe. So just take some time to get the cam placement just right. So that's probably pretty good right there. It's not going to walk out, and you can weight test it. These are called nuts or chocks, and what you do is you look for a constriction in the rock, sort of like this one right here, and you take a nut and you place it in, and it'll fit in there. So that was a bad nut placement right there. That's not something you want to weight. Maybe try flipping the nut over the other way. See how it's, well, we'll go size up from that. So we'll try fitting this one in here. It's wiggling around a little bit, but it'll hold. We'll try flipping it over. What you're trying to get is as much surface area contact. See, there's a little curve here. There's a curve on the inside of the nut here. So what we're trying to do is get this slotted well into the crack and set it by weight testing it, by jerking on it a little bit, and that should hold a pretty reasonable fall. So what we do is we'd unclip that from our bunch of nuts right here. Take a quick draw and clip the nut, and then clip that to our rope and continue climbing. So this is a horizontal nut placement right here, which is not ideal. So a lot of times it'll hold a fall if it's weighted straight down or off to the right, but if it's weighted to the left, it'll just come out. So we try to avoid that. You can also, this constriction is kind of nice because you can put it in both ways. And that's actually a pretty good nut placement because it's flaring out in the crack. So it'll pull down pretty well, left pretty well, and even right okay. If you go straight right, it'll come out. This is a bolt. This is actually a relatively modern bolt. You can see it's rated for 25 kilonewtons up along this face. And this is drilled into the rock about 3 or 4 inches. And then this is called a bolt hanger, and this is screwed on there. And I most times try to avoid climbing with bolts. They scar the rock, they're unsightly, and actually you can see there's another few up ahead. There's a line going all the way up this face. But the reason we use bolts a lot of times is if you're climbing in an area that you couldn't get any protection in. Over here you can, so this bolt is a little bit unnecessary, except that a lot of times people use bolts to allow people to climb without having expensive gear like cams and nuts. Each one of these cams is about $60. If you get a nicer set, you're paying $80 to $100 per cam, and you need a lot of them, especially to do a climb like this. You need 7 or 8 of them, which gets expensive pretty fast. So bolts are a cheaper alternative, and they allow people who don't have the money to afford trad gear like this. It's called trad gear. It allows them to climb. Inside this cam placement, you can see it's pretty easy to remove. The rock does mar the lobes a little bit, and the rock itself inside the pocket looks pretty pristine. This hasn't taken a big fall or taken huge loads, but that's pretty characteristic of how a cam will mark the rock and leave pretty minimal impacts. Sometimes nuts can get stuck, and a lot of times they get left in the rock. This one, it's hard to, well, a lot of times it'll be hard to pull out. You can see the aluminum is actually softer than the rock, and the rock will mar and mark up this. But also, sometimes you can see a little bit of scarring in the rock from it. That's a potential impact from nuts. And cams are usually pretty good about it. If it's sandstone, cams can leave a groove, but most times we're trying to keep it pretty clean. One thing you want to avoid are nut and cam placements in rock that's not necessarily the highest quality. You can see the top of this crack is actually moving. Not only is that a safety hazard, but you can also potentially damage the rock face, and potentially, if you fell on this, it would A, rip the rock out, which could hit your belayer, or B, it could cause a severe fall and injury to the climber.